This is a wolf. They hunt deer, run down elk, dismantle entire bison. The grey wolf has zero natural predators. Nothing hunts them, nothing even challenges them. But if you spend enough time tracking wolf packs in the dead of winter, you'll start noticing something that is strange. One minute the wolves are hunting, and the next, the entire pack suddenly stops. They break their formation, and then they run. They were running the exact same way a deer reacts when it sees a wolf. But the thing they were running from wasn't a massive grizzly bear or a territorial mountain lion. In fact, the animal chasing them is supposed to be prey. They were running from a moose. Wolves are faster than them, more tactical than them, designed entirely for killing other large animals. And a moose eats shrubs. So why would an entire pack of the forest's greatest predators ever flee from what kinda just looks like an awkward deer? Well, to understand why a wolf pack would rather starve than fight a moose, we first have to look at how we actually view this animal. Because humans have a really bad habit of looking at herbivores and assuming that because they eat plants, they must be peaceful. When most people think of a moose, they picture a goofy, oversized deer with a weird nose that just wades around in ponds eating twigs all day. They seem like slow, gentle giants. And to be fair, they do look ridiculous. But if you think a moose is just a big deer, you're dead wrong. These things are highly aggressive megafauna that just happen to still be alive today, and they have notoriously really bad anger issues. Forget the skittish, flighty personality of a white-tailed deer. Moose are highly territorial, extremely irritable, and they genuinely don't care what you are. If you get too close to a moose, it doesn't matter if you're a human, a bear, or a wolf. They'll actively try to put you in the ground. It's 1,500 pounds, and has rage problems. But obviously, being really angry doesn't somehow make you immune to getting your leg bit off. So what actually happens when a wolf tries to bite one? Well, before these guys can even fight, there's another issue. When you watch a nature documentary, the camera angles often make it hard to grasp just how massive these animals actually are. A large male grey wolf is a big animal. They can weigh around 100 to maybe 120 pounds. That's a very large dog. But a fully grown bull moose? They can stand over 7 feet tall right at the shoulder. That means their back is taller than a door frame, and they can weigh up to 1,500 pounds. So when a wolf pack looks at a moose, they're looking at an animal that outweighs a single wolf by more than 10 times. If you want to actually visualize this scale, imagine a pack of normal house cats trying to organize a coordinated takedown on a fully grown German Shepherd. Good luck with that, Mr. Mittens. A wolf hunts by latching onto an animal and using its own body weight as leverage to drag the prey down to the ground. But a 100-pound wolf physically cannot exert enough leverage to pull down a 1,500-pound moose. The moose simply weighs too much. The wolf is just extra cargo at that point. But wolves hunt in packs, right? A dozen wolves should be able to take down one big target, right? You would think that numbers would solve the weight problem, but wild predators have a very strict rule. For humans, if we get injured, we go to the hospital. We heal up and we go back to our lives. For a wolf, a single broken rib, a fractured leg, or a shattered jaw means they're completely screwed. If a wolf gets kicked and breaks its jaw, it can no longer eat. It can no longer hunt. It becomes a liability to the pack, and it will suffer an agonizing death by starvation. They have to be careful. Yes, a moose is a massive amount of food that could feed the pack for over a week, but the risk of getting seriously hurt is just way too high. It's either you kill or you don't, and if you get hurt trying, you die. Wolves are incredibly smart animals, and they're fully aware of this. They know that engaging a fully grown moose means that there's a high probability that at least one member of the pack isn't going to survive the afternoon. And unless they're literally days away from starving to death, that risk is simply never worth it. So if the wolves do decide they're hungry enough to risk it, how does the hunt actually start? If a wolf pack is desperate enough to test a moose, they'll usually approach it slowly, trying to gauge its health and its reaction. See, wolves are hardwired to chase things. When an elk or a caribou sees a wolf, it panics and sprints, and that triggers the wolves to pursue, exhaust the target, and strike when the animal is tired. But when wolves approach a healthy adult moose, the moose often refuses to run. Instead of turning and fleeing, the moose will just stop what it's doing, turn around, stand its ground, and literally just stare the pack down. The wolves just freeze. Their entire hunting loop is broken. They're geared up for a chase, ready to bite at the back legs of a fleeing animal. But now, they're forced to stop dead in their tracks and stare back at a 1,500-pound monster that's actively daring them to make the first move. Yeah, try me, bro. So the wolves lose their momentum, and they lose the element of panic. But if the moose is just standing there completely still, why don't the wolves just swarm it all at once? When you think of a prey animal defending itself, you usually think of a horse or a deer kicking its back legs out as it runs away. Sure, a horse will kick backwards to create distance. A horse wants to escape. But a moose will stand its ground and use its front hooves. A moose wants to make sure you don't. These are heavy, sharp points of bone backed by hundreds of pounds of pure muscle. And the terrifying part is the mobility. A moose can strike with its front legs in almost any direction. They can strike forward, they can strike sideways, and they have pinpoint accuracy. A single strike from a moose's front hoof can crush a wolf's skull instantly. It can snap a spine, cave in a rib cage, or completely shatter a pelvis. So yeah, this isn't just going to leave a bruise. The moose is heavily armed, and it knows exactly how to use those weapons. When the wolves try to close the distance, they're walking straight into something that can crush their skull in a fraction of a second. The wolves have to constantly dart in and out, terrified of getting too close to the front end of the animal. But what if a wolf is actually fast enough? What if it manages to dodge the hooves and gets a perfectly clean bite right on the moose's body? Let's say a wolf gets past the hooves and manages to sink its teeth into the moose's shoulder or neck. This is usually the killing blow for most prey. Wolves kill by crushing the windpipe or tearing major arteries in the neck. But against a moose, this strategy basically does nothing. The moose is covered in an incredibly thick hide, which is then layered with coarse fur and packed over slabs of solid muscle. The wolf's teeth are genuinely so short that they literally aren't long enough to pierce all the way through the hide and the muscle to reach anything vital. A wolf can bite a moose as hard as it possibly can, and it will basically just give the moose a very painful surface wound. Because the moose is so ridiculously thick, the wolf's primary weapon is rendered completely useless. Biting a moose, you're basically biting a furry brick wall. They can't deliver a fatal bite. This means that to actually do any real damage, the wolf has to hold onto the moose for a long time, trying to tear the muscle. But the longer a wolf stays attached to the moose, the higher the chance that the moose just turns around and stomps it into the dirt. So yeah, fighting a moose on flat ground is a terrible idea. But wolves are smart. If flat ground doesn't work, they just wait for winter to give them a massive terrain advantage. Or at least, that's what they try to do. Winter is usually the absolute best time for wolves to hunt. When the snow gets deep, a crust forms on the top layer of the ice. Wolves have wide paws that act like natural snowshoes. They can run lightly on top of the snow crust without sinking in, which allows them to chase down heavy prey like elk who punch through the crust and get bogged down in the deep snow. The prey exhausts itself trying to run, and the wolves just glide over the top and pick them off. It gives the wolves a massive advantage. But a moose is built completely differently than an elk. A moose has stilt-like legs. Their legs let them step incredibly high, allowing the moose to simply plow straight through deep snow without tiring out. An elk will get completely bogged down in waist-deep snow, but a moose just casually wades through it like it's walking through tall grass. The wolves are expecting the snow to trap the moose, but the moose is just looking down like, what snow? The deeper the snow gets, the more the environment actually favors the massive herbivore. If the snow is incredibly soft and deep, the wolves actually start to struggle. They sink in, their mobility is reduced, and they can't dart out of the way of the hooves fast enough. Meanwhile, the moose remains completely unbothered. The wolves lose their speed advantage, and the moose gets to keep its massive height advantage. But what happens when there isn't any snow? What if it's the middle of the summer and the wolves have the moose completely surrounded in a forest? If a moose is ever genuinely feeling overwhelmed by a pack of wolves on dry land, they have a highly effective retreat. They'll deliberately wade out into a lake, a river, or a deep swamp. Moose are incredibly strong swimmers. Because of their massive lungs and buoyant bodies, they're perfectly comfortable in the water. They'll wade out until the water is up to their chest or their neck, and then they'll just stop and turn around. This completely neutralizes the wolves. Wolves are okay swimmers, but they're absolutely terrible at fighting while treading water. And trying to fight a 1,500-pound monster while you're doing the doggy paddle, or wolfie paddle, is a really bad idea. If a wolf wants to attack the moose now, it has to swim out into the deep water. It has no leverage, no speed, and no ability to dodge. If a wolf swims up, the moose can literally just lift its heavy front hoof, place it on top of the wolf's head, and hold it underwater until it drowns. By retreating to the water, the moose takes away the wolf's numbers and speed, and forces him into a spot where the moose is completely untouchable. The wolves basically just have to sit on the shoreline, bark at the moose for a few hours, and then eventually give up and go home. Okay, so water is a safe zone, but what if a moose is caught miles away from a lake? If there's no water around, the wolves have to rely on the best strategy they're actually known for: flanking. The way a wolf pack takes down a large animal is by surrounding it. A few wolves will jump around in the front, barking and snapping to keep the animal distracted and focused forward. Meanwhile, the rest of the pack will sneak around the back and bite at the vulnerable hind legs and hamstrings. It's a perfect strategy to divide the prey's attention, but a smart moose knows exactly how to stop this. If a moose realizes it's being surrounded, it won't stay in the open. It'll slowly back its rear end up into a thicket of incredibly dense pine trees, or it'll back itself flat against a steep rock wall. By simply covering its blind spot, the moose completely outsmarts the pack's entire strategy. The wolves can no longer get to the hindquarters. The flank is gone. The moose has effectively forced the entire pack to stand right in front of it. If the wolves want to eat, they're now forced to attack the moose head-on. And as we already established, attacking the front of a moose means walking directly into the death zone of the front hooves. The wolves can't distract it, they can't flank it, and they can't surprise it. They just have to stare at a wall of muscle and bone that's waiting for them to make a mistake. This all sounds like a great theory for the moose, but does this actually hold up in the real world? Well, we don't just have to guess how this plays out. In Lake Superior, there is a secluded area called Isle Royale. It's a massive island completely cut off from the mainland, and on this island, there's only two major mammal species: wolves and moose. It's oddly convenient for this video. Scientists have been studying the animals on Isle Royale for over 60 years, tracking exactly who kills who and how often, and the data reveals something incredible. The wolves on Isle Royale almost never attack healthy adult moose. They aren't just going, I think I'd rather have elk today. They're actively avoiding them. When researchers examine the bones of the moose that the wolves actually managed to kill, they find a very clear pattern. The wolves strictly target calves, moose that are incredibly old, moose that have severe arthritis, or moose that are already starving to death from harsh winters. And the statistics completely back this up. In the real world, apex predators actively avoid healthy moose at all costs. Predators want a guaranteed win against a weakened target, because every time they try to fight a healthy adult, they lose. So healthy adults are basically off limits. But what happens when the wolves target the one thing they are actually supposed to eat? A calf. If a wolf pack spots a young moose calf, this is usually their best chance for a meal. The calf is small, inexperienced, and lacks the muscle to defend itself. But there's a massive problem standing in the way: the mother. You might assume that a cow moose would act defensively, that she would stand over a calf, shield it with her body, and try to fend off the wolves as they circle. But a mother moose goes on the offensive. When a wolf pack threatens her calf, she enters a state of absolute hyper-aggression. She actively charges the pack. She takes it very personally. She'll pick a specific wolf, lower her head, and sprint directly at it with the sole intention of stomping it to death. And she won't just chase it for a few feet to scare it away. A furious mother moose will chase the wolf for miles through the forest, completely abandoning her calf for a few minutes just to ensure she puts the predator in the dirt. The moment they trigger the mother, the hunt is over. The wolves are now running for their lives from a 1,000-pound herbivore that wants nothing more than to crush their ribs. The wolves have to scatter in a panic, and the hunt is completely ruined. But surely there has to be some scenario where the wolves win against a healthy adult. What if they execute the perfect ambush? Let's imagine the absolute worst case scenario for the moose. Let's say the moose makes a mistake. It wanders into an open clearing, it doesn't back up against a tree, and the wolf pack executes a completely silent ambush. 3 large wolves manage to sneak up directly behind the moose, and they get a solid latch onto the moose's hind legs and hamstrings. The wolves are digging their claws in and biting down as hard as they can to drag the massive animal to the ground. This is the exact moment an elk or a caribou would collapse. But even in this perfect scenario, the moose has one final, completely overpowered trait: its unyielding stamina. The moose will simply start walking, and then it will start trotting. With hundreds of pounds of wolves literally hanging off its back legs, tearing at its flesh, the moose just powers through the weight. The moose will simply drag the wolves through the snow, through the bush, and through the forest for as long as it needs. The wolves are exerting maximum energy just trying to hold on, while the moose is just casually carrying them like a heavy backpack. A very angry, very bitey backpack. Eventually, after being dragged through branches and rocks, the wolves will simply exhaust themselves. Their jaws will physically give out, their lungs will burn, and they'll be forced to let go and watch the moose just keep walking away. Even when the wolves do everything perfectly, the moose just outlasts them. So you're probably wondering, what about the giant spikes on the moose's head? The very first thing you'll notice on a bull moose are the massive antlers. They can span over 6 feet wide and weigh up to 40 pounds. They look absolutely terrifying, and it's very easy to assume that this is the moose's primary weapon for fighting off a pack of wolves. You would picture the moose lowering its head and swinging those giant spikes through the pack like a scythe. But realistically, the moose almost never uses its antlers on wolves. Those massive antlers are actually highly specialized weapons, but they're designed for a completely different enemy: other moose. During the mating season, bull moose use their antlers to crash into each other, lock horns, and wrestle for dominance. The wide shape of the antlers is perfect for catching another moose's antlers and pushing. But against a fast-moving target low to the ground like a wolf, the antlers are actually kinda clunky and useless. If the moose lowers its head to try and gore a wolf, it exposes its vulnerable neck and eyes to the rest of the pack. So the moose just keeps its head up, keeps its eye on the predators, and relies entirely on the hooves. Those giant spikes aren't even for predators. They're just for showing off to the ladies. Antlers are for flirting. Hooves are for fighting. But wherever they are, moose are pretty sick and a little scary. But if you're not actively trying to eat one, they're probably not a threat to you. That is, unless you're a shrub. Then they may still be a threat. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, leave some more suggestions in the comment on other video ideas. I actually read your comments too, so please suggest things. This channel is still relatively new since it's my second channel, so also consider subscribing. And if you want to see my video about dragonflies, check it out here.